Assalamualaikum. Boleh ya? Okey. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan selamat petang kepada panel jemputan kita. Profesor Madya Dr. Faradina, kemudian kita ada beberapa rakan pensyarah dari Fakulti Pendidikan. Oh, nampak Dr. Misima. Kan Dr. Misima tak ada. Okey, Dr. Fariza, Dr.
Ketua Pusat
Ketua Pusat kita. Kemudian apa lagi, Dr. Hawati, dan adalah beberapa nama mungkin saya tak sempat nak sebut dekat sini, dan juga tak lupa kepada semua peserta bengkel yang dapat meluangkan masa untuk hadir ke bengkel kita pada petang ini. Saya Hazrati bagi pihak AJK Bengkel pada hari ini ingin mengucapkan selamat datang ke bengkel DDR, Design and Development Research, anjuran Pusat Inovasi Pengajaran dan Pembelajaran Fakulti Pendidikan. Jadi bagi berkati perkongsian ilmu kita pada petang ini, elok kita mulakan dahulu dengan bacaan umum kita Al-Fatihah.
Terima kasih jumpa kami.
Sama-sama. Okey. Baik, memandangkan saya diberitahu yang kita jangkakan kita akan ada international student, cuma saya tak pasti dalam senarai yang ramai ni ada ke belum, jadi saya mohon izin untuk meneruskan bengkel ini dalam bahasa Inggeris, tapi kita fleksibel jika peserta ingin bertanyakan soalan dalam bahasa Melayu juga tidak ada masalah. Jadi saya teruskan dengan bahasa Inggeris. Jadi so to continue with this session, allow me to introduce our speaker for this workshop. So Associate Professor Dr. Faradina Yusof adalah speaker kita. So she is an active scholar researcher practitioner in the area of higher education, Web 2.0, social media, educational games and mobile learning. So she has published more than 20 high impact journals and recipients of various national and international prestigious awards, including Outstanding Journal Award, Article Award 2015, Outstanding Journal Article Award 2015 USA, and Outstanding Women in Humanities and Social Science 2018 by Venus International Foundation, to name a few. So recently, Dr. Faradina has won the 3rd place in Anugerah Khas Menteri Pendidikan Malaysia, Reka Bentuk Kurikulum dan Penyampaian Inovatif AKRI in 2018. So with research grants accumulated more than 1 million ringgit Malaysia, banyak tu. She has led and engaged in various national and international collaborative projects with scholars from Australia, USA, Thailand and Philippines. So currently, she owns 4 patents, 15 copyrights and 21 trademarks. So her products and innovations in the area of teaching and learning have been awarded gold, silver and bronze at various national level competitions. So Dr. Faradina is currently the Director of University of Malaya's Academic Enhancements and Leadership Development Center, ADDIE. So thank you Dr. Farah once again for joining us this evening. So before I hand over the session to Dr. Farah, so a short briefing about the workshop. So Dr. Faradina will conduct the workshop for about 1 hour, and then we will continue with Q&A session after the session. So during the workshop, our admin will set all participants' mic to mute mode so that we can give ways to Dr. Farah to present. And also please take note that this session is recorded and we will share the video later. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to hand over the session to our panel, Dr. Farah. Dr. Farah, over to you.
Thank you so much, Puan Hazrati. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, and very good afternoon to everyone, all the participants. Thank you so much for your interest in this topic. I intended should not be a lecture, or it's just a sharing session and also discussion, because all of you are been doing research in the area of DDR, Design and Developmental Research. So this is nothing new to you. My expectation is that you have some background in it. So you can we can make it an interactive session as well. Yeah? So I will be sharing my screen now. Bolehkah saya tekan share screen, Puan Hazrati? Okay ya? Sekejap. Okay, can you see my screen, everyone?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. So the topic of our discussion today is Design and Development Research, or DDR in short. So the structure of our presentation will be, I have divided into 3 sessions. I call it part A, to introduce to IDT. IDT is Instructional Design and Technology field, so that we are on the same page. What do we mean by IDT? Okay. So then we'll discuss about Design and Development Research itself, DDR, and I will be talking about the 2 categories of DDR, Type 1 and Type 2. Everyone is familiar with this, but this is just refresher module. Okay, so part B is more into how to apply DDR into our research, and I put some notes, I call it some considerations. Okay, and the closing part is about Q&A or discussion session. All right. Now the introduction session will be on IDT and also DDR. When we talk about IDT, what do we really mean about IDT? Okay, the instructional design field has been in existence for so many years. Okay, since the birth of, some say since the birth of internet, some say birth of it comes together with the military innovations. Some say it comes with the library innovation. Okay, whatever it is, they have some in common. And by the way, scholars in the field of IDT don't really agree with one single definition, and that's why we think that there are so many variations. Okay, I also, so my supervisor friends, you probably will see students coming doing their research with so many aspects of it. Okay, so for student, you think that alamak besarnya, why is it so so big? Okay, so you can read about other people's definition, but for this session, this is what I want to highlight. Okay, to me personally, IDT, or Instructional Design and Technology, is a systematic planning of learning experiences that encompass 5 phases. Okay, analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation, with the purpose of improving an individual's learning experiences and performances. Okay, you can notice that I have highlighted in blue some of the word. Okay, it is systematic, because if it's not systematic and unplanned, it cannot be instructional design. Because when you want to run an instructional design experience, or a course, or a module, or a teaching, you need to plan first. So that's why the word systematic is important. Second, it's not just about learning products. It is about a person's or individual's experience. Okay, so it's about planning and someone's learning experiences. So when we give this kind of definition, we immediately, if it's me, I will immediately think of a person who I want to mold or shape. Okay, the learning experiences. So how do I do that? By doing the 5 phases. Okay, I know you already familiar with ADDIE model. You call it model, but I talked to Molenda, Michael Molenda, who was the first or the father of instructional design field. When I was doing my PhD in US, I had the opportunity to meet him in person. So excited. So we discussed about a lot of things, and one of it, he said that people keep on saying ADDIE model, ADDIE model, ADDIE model, and I don't like it. He said it's supposed to be a framework. So now I teach my students, it's not ADDIE model, it's called ADDIE framework. Why? Because framework is much more generic. Okay, if you have a model, you have to follow it step by step, and there is sub module in it, okay, or sub step in it. But if you call it a framework, it can be renamed. And by the way, the 5 phases of design is not primarily come from our field. Okay, it comes from other field. Okay, so we call it ADDIE framework. So what is the purpose of doing this? It is to improve a person's learning. One, to improve the person experiences. The experience may not be learning that we plan for them. It could be something that they discover when they come to our training or our learning experience design. Okay, and also to improve that person performance. Okay, so these are the keywords that I hope that you will remember when we do this session, because all my sessions are related to this. Yeah. Next, what is design and developmental research? Okay. If we want to do DDR, okay, students especially will have to cite this person. If you don't cite these two person, Richie and Klein, tak sah. It's like you're not doing DDR. Maksudnya your literature review tu tak lengkap. Okay, so what is DDR? It is a systematic study of design, development, and evaluation processes. Okay, so I highlight the word processes, meaning that when you want to do DDR study, you have to make it into a process, the 5-phase study, with the aim of establishing an empirical basis for the creation of, so these two authors are very nice, they include instructional and non-instructional products, okay, and tools and new or enhanced models that govern their development. If you notice, and we will talk about this later, so the systematic design, the DDR is a systematic design of study, okay, with the 5 main phases. And if you look at this, you can immediately see the 2 types of DDR. Okay, one is focused on products and tools, and the other is focusing on the models, the instructional design models. So this is quote from Richie and Klein. Okay, now having to know this definition, let us see whether DDR is not about. Okay, so it is not a study about, number 1, instructional psychology or learning sciences. These are 2 different fields or 2 different subfields in education. Okay, so we don't really focus on the sciences or the the mindset of learners. Okay, we focus on the processes. You look at the left side. We don't study about the media delivery system comparisons or impact. Let's say you have 2 different media and you wanted to compare the pros and cons or the effectiveness of both. This is not about, that is not DDR, that is something else. Okay, educational research. So it is also not message design studies. For example, you wanted to see perhaps whether the messages delivered in one medium is better than the other medium. That is not DDR. Or research on the profession. For example, you wanted to see whether instructional designers' skills can be updated. That is different study. It is not DDR. Having said so, I just want to share with you that I am very much interested. I come with DDR, and then now I have switched a little bit about researching our profession. If you have read or have heard about civic-minded instructional designer, so that is my research interest. Okay, at that time. Now it's a little bit sama lah, tapi I mix into something others. So remember, DDR is about the processes of producing instructional or non-instructional products and models, not about the one that you see on the right side. Okay. Now, when we talk about design and development research, we can do or we can apply any methods. Okay, because DDR itself is not a specific method, it is a methodology. Okay, you can discuss with your lecturers in research methodology class. So it's a different. So if we want to do research in DDR, we can either use mixed methods, quantitative methods, or qualitative methods. But it has to be, okay, the main syarat, or okay, the main component of your research must be authenticity. What is authentic? Authenticity means authenticity or real life projects. Okay, authenticity meaning something that is happening. It's not something that you fikir-fikir, angan-angan. It's not about prediction. It's something is happening. You are doing DDR research is to help solving real problems and not hypothetical problems. That is the main component of DDR. Okay. Now, everybody now will talk about type 1, type 2, type 1, type 2. But sometimes this type 1 and type 2 are, how can I say it nicely? Confused. Okay, now, categories of DDR, Ritchie and Klein and Nelson said they divided into two. Okay, two categories. The first one, research on products and tools. What is products and tools? Those are the learning materials, the curriculum, what else? The e-learning course that you develop, or we can say output of your DDR research. Okay. Research on products and tools are also called type 1. In Ritchie, Klein, and Nielsen said this is type 1 research. And many of us are doing this, I believe. No? But it also be known with other names, which made us even confused. Okay, for example, it is called design-based research by Wang and Hannah Finn. Okay, DBR. Sometimes people ask what the difference between DBR and DDR. So it is clear in Ritchie, Klein, and Nelson that DBR is one type of DDR. Okay. Second, Driscoll in 1984. Driscoll is his work is more on the IT or instructional, information technology field. It is called systems-based evaluation. Okay, because people from IT, they will focus more on the technical part. So and mostly are looking at evaluating the effectiveness of the system. So they call it systems-based evaluation. Now, Regalus and Frick, and also well-known Van de Ecker, they call it formative research. Okay, because in DDR, there is one aspect of evaluating formatively the product that we design. So you can focus on that. I will show you the visual of it. Okay, so type 1, okay, specifically on research on the products and the tools. Okay, and you can call it by other names. Type 2 is quite rare for us to see, but there are people doing it. Okay, because it's on research on design and development model. What do we mean by this? I'll talk about that later, but just a brief introduction. You research on the model, the instructional design model, whether that model is applicable when you design and develop your own product. Whereas research on products and tools, you test whether you start with the 5 ADDIE phases, and then you talk a little bit about lessons learned. Okay, but you don't study the models that you used. And that's the difference between the two. Okay, they give a better description. So I'm taking this from their paper itself in 2004. Say that for type 1, the emphasis is on study of specific product or program design or program development or evaluation of projects. That is their emphasis. Okay. Whereas in type 2 study, it is a study of design, development, or evaluation processes. Okay, processes, tools, or models. So the product from type 1 will be lessons learned from developing a specific product and analyzing the conditions that facilitate their use. For example, excuse me, let's say you develop, I'm sorry, I use you, but I mean friends, kawan-kawan. Okay. So the product from type 1, let's say we created a courseware, okay, on learning tajweed, for example. I have one of my master student doing that too, about developing a courseware to teach tajweed. So the product of her research, or this type of research, type 1, what are the lessons learned from designing the courseware, the e-tajweed courseware, and what are the conditions that facilitate the use. Okay, so this one is very context specific, whereas in type 2, the product of your research in type 2 will be a new design, new development or evaluation procedures or models, meaning that you create new model. Okay, you don't use the ADDIE, but you rename it Farah model, for example. Hazrati's model, sebab I nampak muka Hazrati kat sini. Okay, and you have that steps by step what to do. You have your own diagram, okay, and you also write about the conditions on the use of your model. So it's not about the product, okay, that is type 1, but the processes or the development of new model. I can show you an example later. So if you look at type 1, it is more generalized, okay, meaning that once you have developed your own model, let's say Faradina model, so I can generalize it, and everybody else, I mean other instructional designers can use Faradina model to develop their own specific product. So we go from context specific in type 1, go to generalized one, okay? Now, remember I said there are two categories of DDR. The first one is research on products and tools. Under the research on products and tools, there are several types. Okay, the first one, we call it comprehensive DDR. Comprehensive means everything is included. So if we look into or if we follow the ADDIE framework, and we then create an output, okay, instructional material, we have to document the entire D&D design and development process, meaning that how do we conduct the need assessment in analysis phase, how do we do the prototyping in design, how do we develop implementation until evaluation phase. So you have to describe in your paper or in your thesis these entire processes, okay? And you also have to discuss the design decisions. Why do you select this particular theory, for example, let's say theory of motivation? Why do you select this theory of motivation by author A and B in your designing of the product? That is very important, okay, if you are doing type 1 research. So, but don't forget, okay, because this is DDR research, remember we said in the beginning, the purpose or the aim at the end is to let others learn on how to develop somewhat similar products or make it suitable for their own context. So you need to have reflections on the issues that you discover when you design and develop the product, or sometimes you can call it what are the lessons learned. Okay, so then you will have usually in your chapter 5 recommendations for other designers. This is very important, and these, I mean, reflection and the recommendation to other designers should be in your, if you're claiming yours is DDR research, right? So that is comprehensive DDR. Now, if you don't want to do the comprehensive DDR, ADDIE, where you have to document everything from the beginning to the end, you can also select one specific ID phase. For example, I try to visualize it, but Richie and Klein don't do this, but I hope this is helpful for you. Let's say I just want to focus on the analysis phase. I can do that, meaning that, excuse me, for example, I focus on what are the needs of the teachers in Malaysia during this COVID-19 pandemic online case. pandemic teaching related to COVID-19. Okay, so that is need assessment, for example. So what is the output of that research, which focusing on the A part or analysis part, is recommendations to do training for the university administrators, for example, or recommendations to Kementerian Kementerian Pendidikan on how to train teachers well, what kind of content needed. So that can be a study by itself. Okay, now look at the orange one. I put D and D because D and D are good friends. Okay, you cannot pisahkan or separate both. Okay, you have, when you say design, you have to do development. So you can also do design and development of the product. So you focus on one product, let's say a courseware that you want to develop, and just talk in detail about the theories, the framework that you want to use, the steps you use, and so on. Okay, for these kind of studies, you may want to do like screenshot of the products itself. Okay, let's say you're developing courseware, so adalah some screenshots, the introduction part, the evaluation, and the assessment, and so on. Okay, now if you do implementation, and again, if you do implementation, usually it comes with evaluation. So this is pair. Okay, if you have a product, you don't develop it, you found it. For example, there is an app you would like to use. Apa app ni? App A lah, senang. Okay, so let's say you discover this app A and you wanted to see, you want to implement it in your context or your students, let's say university students tahun 1. So then you want to evaluate the effectiveness of that product that you don't develop. So how come you talk about the processes of developing? So what should you focus on? You should focus on how you implement it. Okay, so you have to talk about the contextual setting, and you have to talk about the evaluation. So the evaluation part becomes bigger. Okay, so we should talk about the instrument validation, what else? The survey development, how do you come up with that, and then how did you do analysis, and so on. So these are called specific ID phase. You can choose what you want. Okay. Again, even though you focus on or choose on one just specific ID phase, you still need to discuss the design decisions. Okay, why do you want to focus on only this? Okay, and this one cannot come from the air. You have to look at from the literature, right? Again, you have to have reflections on the issues and the lessons learned, and give recommendations for other instructional designers on how to go about it. Right. The third one is focusing on the tool or the product development and use. Okay, and this one is that I mentioned, if you want to, it's much more on evaluation of a product that you don't develop. Okay, but you have to talk also about how you implement it in your own context or setting. So this one focus on the tools, and this is where you talk about the formative evaluation or summative evaluation of that product use. Okay, so you can also talk something about navigation. How do is it easy navigation? If you develop a website, for example, educational website, you can ask questions in your survey or in your evaluation instrument. How do the users experience the navigation, or the functions offered in that product, or efficiency or ease of learning, and so on. Okay, you know, you probably have heard this, what do you call that? The theory, apa nama teori tu ya? Tiba hilang tak? Okay, I tend to do that. Ada nama teori tu. There's the theory that I always use, but now I forget.
You tahu.
Yes, correct. U-Taut model. Siapa nama Azmi? Siapa nama ni? Who's the tokoh? You remember?
Venkatesh.
Bagusnya. Okay. So these are Venkatesh model and U-Taut and TAM model and so on, where they come with. Okay, so you will use this a lot. But let me share with you, I've been in some editorial board journals and also be reviewer for some high impact or ISI journals. The editors literally told the reviewers, do not accept any you tout ke, you temp ke model because it has been over researched, over documented. Okay, and this model doesn't come really from our field. It comes kita pinjam. Okay, it comes from other field like marketing and business field. Okay, and also from computer science. So we actually education usually instructional design technology we pinjam most of these models, and now it has been over researched. Okay, so if you're thinking of publishing your research, try not to use this as a whole. Contoh, for example, you take your evaluation studies only focus on the UTAUT model. Try not to do that. What you can try to do, and my suggestion is, try to take, let's say, 2 variables from UTAUT, 2 variables from other theory, another 2 from motivation theory, and so on. Okay? Yes, sorry, I tend to membebel a bit. So you talk in this kind of research, you talk about its usage. Okay, how many students log into your system or your product, and most important is how do they perceive it can be improved. Okay, remember this is DDR. We always think about how to improve, how to improve, how to improve, how to help others, right? So that's the 3 types in type 1 research. So far okay ke? Am I too fast? Okay. Can I move to the next one, yeah? Now, the second part, or the type 2 of DDR research, there are 3 subtypes of it, okay? And this one is quite rare for us to look into, but it is possible lah. Some people love to create new model, like I like to label Paradina model, so I will just focus on this type 2 models. Okay, so the first one is about model development. Okay, model development is that you study the model. No, you don't study the model. You study, you do a product, but you don't discuss the process of designing it. You focus on the steps that you use to do it. Okay, for example, and this result in new or enhanced or updated ID model. Okay, let me share with you a paper I did in 2008. It's about instructional media production. Let's see if I can change. Do I share screen or I share? Okay, I'll try to bring the paper. Can you see the paper on your screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So this is the paper that come out from my instructional design course that I took in US, okay, when I was studying PhD there. So in one of the courses, we have to do consultation with real people. If I'm not mistaken, this one with okay. So in this, the context of the study is that we help another lecturer who is teaching a group of elementary teachers, if I'm not mistaken, on how to do multimedia production of their learning content. So if you look at the paper, okay, the title will be A Practical Instructional Design Approach. So right from the beginning, I'll talk about the instructional design approach. I don't talk about the product that I design. Okay, then I give the context, which is instructional consulting environment. So then I talk about a little bit only about the context, and then I talk about the methodology. The methodology is very important. So I give the setting. So this happened in the university in a 3-credit-hour course, and then what the project is all about, okay, and how I mentioned here who are involved in this project, because this is important when you want to later talk about the recommendations for other designers. For example, here I talk about a mixed group of 4 beginners. Macam ni, ya? You can see that. I said a mixed group of 4 beginner and intermediate level instructional designers were involved in designing and developing a tutorial-based instructional material for pre and in-service teachers on creating KidPix software into reading and language arts curriculum. So here I give the context. So it's about 4 people working in a project. Okay, and then who are the clients? I talk about the client, and then I talk about who are the SME, subject matter expert. So I talk a little bit about our relationship in it and how we come up with doing the project. And then mode of inquiry is using Sean. Okay, Sean is talk a lot about reflections in designs. Okay, so if you want to do DDR type 2, yours will be usually you have to state him or quote him. Okay, kalau tak sah. Alright. So I don't come up with my own model. Okay, I'll show you what the paper is all about. Okay, so I come up with this. Tak boleh, I don't know how to kecilkan lagi, but this one lah. So this is the product of my paper, of my research for this paper. Okay, so I name it Faradina model, tapi tak adalah kasi dia Farah model, for example. So if you look at this process, it's quite similar with the ADDIE framework. That's why ADDIE cannot be called model. It's called framework because I and all designers using ADDIE phases and then make some modifications. For example, alright, start with need analysis, and then not so many instruction design models have this we call it optional macam flowchart yang jenis macam ni, diamond type lah. And then so for what is different from this is that for each of the phases in ADDIE there is a blueprint that the designers have to create, have to become one of the output. So that is one contribution of this study. Okay, second, in all processes we have to do FE. FE means formative evaluation. Okay, like this. So every time we do, regardless of which phase we are, even in analysis phase, we always ask SME, our subject matter expert, to review and provide feedback of our so-called blueprint draft. So once the SME have reviewed, then the ID team, the 4 members, will approve first. Okay, and then if we approve, we can go to the next process. So that is another second contribution of the study to the DDR field. Okay, so this is how you, if you are interested in researching the type 2 DDR, this is the product that you should come out in your paper on your thesis. So then I will explain, okay, if you want to use this model, so this is what you're going to do in analysis phase, what you have to do, and in design until the evaluation phase. Okay, so again, remember DDR, we need to talk about lessons learned. So I then have the practical implication subsection at the end of it. Okay, so I said, okay, I besarkan sikit. I said, following are some of the main lessons learned when following this practical IDEA approach as a means to improve instructional design culture and practices. So I mentioned 1, 2, 3, and 4 lessons learned. So these lessons learned are not for anybody. It is for the designers, our fellow designers, so that when the designers or other instructional designers from other university or from other country wanted to use my model, okay, they are aware of this lessons learned and they can improve it better, because the aim of this research is to improve our current practices. All right, that's one. No questions so far? Nanti teruskan je ya. Now that is the first one of the type 2 research. Now going to second type of the type 2. Okay, it's called model validation. So model validation is it's not so much different from model development, but model validation, you have to use a lot of, I can say most will use statistics lah. Okay, so we have to do rigorous validation of the model, components of the model. So most probably you will see correlation. People talk about path analysis or SME. It can be done also qualitatively. Okay, so but I'm just sharing with you my experience as reviewer and also board member. Um, you can see it's not fair for me to say that they are saying this because it's like a hidden rules lah. But reviewers and editor of the board members know about this. If you have only pure qualitative research, DDR research, you have to make sure you have rich data in it and you really triangulate it, meaning that you have to defend better. It's the same thing with if you have done it quantitatively, but quantitatively you have the numbers to back you up. Okay, so it depends on how you write it. It has to be strong. Okay, so let's see what is the example of model validation. One example is Tracy's multiple intelligence model. Okay, Monica Tracy. She is also one of the popular figure in our ID world. Okay, so she talked about design and development research, a model validation case. Okay, let's see what she talked about. Okay, so I hope you can read the abstract. Okay, she said that this is a report of one case of a study, design and development research. See, she is still doing the design and development research, but her focus in this paper is on the model validation. So she said that after design and expert review model validation, the model, what she called the multiple intelligence design model, which she used ISD, instruction systems design model, as the basis, was tested. Okay, because this is more validation, so there must be some people who validate it or tested it. So it was tested by 4 practicing instructional designers, and then instruction developed for learners was then evaluated using post-test and attitudinal scores with 102 participants. And finally, this report provides a reflection of the lessons learned. Okay, you can see all the characteristics of DDR mentioned there. Yeah. So she talked about the model validation technique, a lot of things. I can share with you my PowerPoint later after the session. So in the PowerPoint, there are some links that might be useful for you. I have actually the references section so that you can look at it if you want to go further. So that is number 2. Okay, first is model development, second is model validation. The third one is model use. Okay, model use is something that quite straightforward, I can say. Let's say you are you just pick one model, instructional design model that you like. Can someone share with me one model that you like? Usually kita guna apa What model do we use? Okay, let's say author A and B lah, senang sekali, tak bias. So let's say this author A and B has this instructional design model, and this instructional design models have been established. Okay, so you just take or apply the model in your own situation. Let's say the author of the instructional design model use it in the Western context. So yours will be in sekolah rendah di daerah Selayang dalam mata pelajaran A, B, and C. Okay, that is what we call model use. So what do you want to discuss about in this kind of research? You want to discuss about the conditions that impact the use of the model. Okay, remember this is research on D&D models, not about the product. So you want to talk about the conditions that make the model useful or something that needs to be improved in the model. And you may end up with the first one, which is model development, having your own model based on that model that you use. Okay, so far. So there are three types of research under research on D&D models. Okay. This is the one that I've shown you. Okay, this is the paper that we talk about. Now, I'm now going to go to the second part of this session. Do you want to do the Q&A now, or do you want to wait until the end?
Maybe kita tunggu sampai habis kot rasanya.
Yeah, alright.
Yeah.
Okay, I realize this is quite heavy. So if you have any questions, just tunggu dulu lah, write it down and then we'll go through together. Now, talking about research, application to research, as I mentioned, DDR is not a predictive research. Okay, this predictive research is something yang kita dah biasa buat lah. You have some hypotheses that you develop upon your observations or theory, and then you design an experiment to test the hypothesis, and then you do your refinement based on the results that you got. Then you do the application of the theory by the practitioners. This is educational research or predictive research, called by Harrington, McKenney, Reeves, and Oliver. So design-based research, which is type 1 of DDR research, we start with issues or problem, real issues and problem. So what we do is that we analyze the practical problems by researchers and practitioners. It's supposed to be in collaboration. That's why authenticity is very important in DDR research. Okay, so let's say you found a teacher in a sekolah rendah who needs help to, okay, you don't start with the solution, but you start with the problems. Okay, let's say you find a sejarah or history teacher in sekolah rendah who have trouble or have problems to teach sejarah effectively to the students. Okay, so that is your issues. So upon digging more and more about that problem, you found out together, of course, with the school teacher, that it's because of the low motivation level of the students to learn history, to learn sejarah. Okay, that is your main issue. So in your problem statement, you have to talk about that. Okay, so you have to analyze the practical problem. Second, you have to develop solutions to tackle or to solve the problems that you have identified using the principles of instructional design. And also, in our field, technological innovations. Okay, this is where you think about using Web 2.0, about mobile learning, about so many apps and so on. Okay, so in DDR, there are cycles. There are many alternative cycles of testing and refinement of the solutions. Okay, this is why DDR is not really not many people can claim and should claim that their research is truly DDR if you do not have the 8 iterative cycles of testing and refinement. So after you have developed the solutions or the proposed solutions, you have to test it for the first time. Okay, and you call it cycle 1, and then you report what are the areas for improvement. Okay, and then you do cycle number 2 after you improve the product. And cycle number 2, you research again, you test it again, you do the screening, and then you improve again the product when you implement and improve it. And then you have cycle 3. So that's what is called iterative cycles. If in your research you don't do this iterative cycle, it may not be DDR. Okay, it's at some point the scholars want us to show that the target audiences or the SME are happy with the product or the solution. If not happy, it is satisfying, and in only you and them can define what is satisfaction to you and them. Okay, so one of the main feature in DDR, it must be iterative cycles, right? And again, reflection on or the recommendations of the design principles that you have experienced from the many cycles that you have done. Okay, so that is DDR, DBR under DDR. Now, I'm aware that I've been told also that many of these participants of this session may be students or researchers in the area. So I have also put it this. Yeah. How to do it based on the thesis. Okay, let's say I hope this is okay with my friends, my lecturer friends. The research proposal or the research structure of the thesis. How many students have problems with, my students also have problems to identify how do we make or embed the DDR in the standard form of thesis. So usually we have 5 chapters or 6 chapters, right? Okay, I'll talk about that later. Now let's take into consideration what Harrington, McKenney, Reeves, and Oliver talk about in June 2007. They did a conference presentation to guide doctoral students on how to turn or how to apply DDR in the standard form of research. Now, so they make this table. The first column, on the very left column, phase 1 is about analysis of practical problems by researchers and practitioners in collaboration. So what are the elements that needs to be in your thesis? First, this is chapter 1 lah, statement of the problem. Second, you have to mention that you have consultation with the researchers or the practitioners. And then, but to me, this is optional. Okay, you can also get it from the literature if you don't have real people to talk to. Second, the research questions, and also in our Malaysian situation, this is chapter 2 is literature review, but in theirs is a little bit of literature review. So you can position this in the research proposal. They have, in overseas, they have this position, okay, but ours usually tak ada lah. So what we have is statement of problem, introduction, rationale or background of the research. We have research questions, and that's it for chapter 1. Okay, for phase 2, the development solutions, development of the solutions or the product, which is chapter 2 in our Malaysian thesis structure. So we start with the literature review and then the theoretical framework, which is very important. Because when if you want, regardless to do type 1 or type 2, you have to have the theories of learning that you wanted to look into. Okay, so you have to talk about the theoretical framework in chapter 2. And then you should also talk about the development of draft principles to guide the design intervention, because this is what differentiate DDR with other educational research. We need to talk about the principles of developing it. Okay, so this is where you put in the ADDIE steps or stages. Okay. Third, the third phase is iterative cycles of testing and refinement of your solutions in practice. So this is similar to the implementation part. So in our chapter, in our thesis, we talk, or this is if in UM is methodology part lah, chapter 3, you talk about how you implement it. The first iteration, and then the second iteration, the third and fourth, and so on. You talk about the participants. How do you collect the data, how do you analyze the data, and how do you implement it. Okay. If you have second or further iteration, again, you talk about the participants, the data collection, the data analysis. Sometimes the participants who evaluate or who take a part in your first cycle could be different from the person or the group of people who do the second iteration of your DDR research. Okay, and you must give some justifications to that. The fourth phase is reflection to produce the design principles and to enhance the solution implementation. So this is more of a conclusion part lah. Okay. Alright, sorry. So looking into what Harrington has proposed, I think in Malaysian situation and also from my experience as supervisors, I usually recommend this to my students. Okay, the chapter, it could be different in UKM or in your respective university, but to me, usually whoever do DDR research will have 6 chapters instead of 5. Okay. The first chapter, again, this is an introduction. You talk about the statement of problem, then research objectives, research questions, and definitions of terms. Okay. In chapter 2, you talk about the theoretical framework and also conceptual framework. I'm sure you know what's the difference between both. And the third chapter, which is the methodology chapter, you talk about the model that you use or the model or the steps you use in the ADDIE framework too. Okay, so you start with the analysis, phase 1, and then design development, and then implementation. And in this implementation section, you perhaps have subcategories of iterative cycle 1, and then subcategory of iterative cycle 2 until the end. And also the last one is evaluation. So that is chapter 3. And chapter 4 focus on the data collection. So you have context, you talk about the context, the participants or the target audiences, the data collection strategies, and also pilot testing. Okay, don't forget pilot testing is also important, but it depends on the topic of your research. Some research may not require pilot testing, but if you are validating research model, especially in type 2 DDR, you need to have the pilot testing because you want to validate the instrument. Okay, next you have chapter 5, data analysis and findings. And finally, chapter 6 is the conclusion. This is where you talk about the implications of your research to the theories of ID or ID model or ID framework, and your recommendations to other designers who want to use, who want to replicate your steps. Okay? Yeah. I just wanted to share this. You know, in type 1 and type 2, most people say if we do DDR, there's only one way of doing it. There's only one method or methodology, which is not correct. Okay? You can and you should actually have multiple methods to complement, or in research what we say, to triangulate your data. Okay? Even though you do qualitative study, you can't just say, this is one case study. But you have to say, oh, I have a case study, I have in-depth interview, I have field observation, I have students' reflection, and so on. So that's why we say that DDR is a rich data. You must portray the richness of your data. If you fail to do so, that is not really a good DDR. Okay. Yep. So that is for type 1. These are the recommended methodologies. I just want to say that for type 2, model validation especially, people now the trend is to do SEM, structural equation modeling, because in the past, we talk about recommendations, but you have seen my paper, that was in 2008. My recommendations to the other instructional designers are qualitative in nature, meaning that, okay, you should do this, don't do that. If you want to do A, you have to do B first, okay, that kind of recommendations. But if you want to publish in a high impact journal, ISI journal now, they want you to back up your data, okay, your recommendation. So one way of doing it is using SEM, meaning that, okay, you have a number, specific values to say, my recommendation 1 is based on my this value, you see, and also back up or triangulated with my in-depth interview. Okay. So then the DDR research is excellent. But it's quite rare for me to see this kind of DDR being done, because it's not easy. It will take several years for a single project, okay, because the iterative process. That's why I don't really encourage my students to claim their research as DDR, because I fear that they don't really follow the strictness of the DDR methods, and that is not so good, not good for them, and also not good for our field. Okay, we claim ourselves as instructional designers, but our research is like caca merba, tak solid, not nice. Okay, it's not good for our field. Okay, nanti orang lain pun ketawa kan kita punya field. That's not so good. Okay, so we must make sure that when we do DDR research, we do it well, we do it excellently, we do it systematically. Okay, so that people won't question the quality. Now, this is almost end of this session. I just put some considerations for you to consider when you want to do DDR research. Now, these are based from my experience. So, in your problem statement, okay, I'm talking more to students if you are interested to do this. You don't write much about the solution. Okay, you must focus your problem statement on the problems or issues faced by your targeted audiences. As I mentioned, you talk about, you found a problem, a sejarah teacher, a history teacher in a school faced a motivational problem. So that is the focus of your problem statement. Now, after you have talked about the problems or issues, then you propose the solutions. Or in our terms, we call it educational interventions, because the product or the learning experiences that we want to give to our targeted audiences are actually interventions. Okay, and you have to make sure that the solutions is really what they need, your targeted audiences need. It's not something that I have hypothetical. Okay, I have seen this a lot when students come with solutions. Doktor, saya nak buat ni, saya nak buat app ni. Oh, app ni bagus, this and that. I say, okay, tell me what problem can this app solve? And then like, oh, okay, we'll take time for them to talk about, okay, which is not good. Huh? You have to think about the problem, then propose the solution. Now, research purpose and objective, you need to make sure this is aligned. Kalau the lecturers kita dah biasa dengar lah ni, constructive alignment sampai dah tertanam lah dalam kepala. So what do we mean by constructive alignment? It means that everything we do, okay, remember our DDR is about the steps, the 5 steps. Okay, it must complement each other. So your research purpose should align with your research objectives, your research questions, your hypothesis, any, and your research approach. Okay, but it has to stem from the problems that you have identified first. Okay. Okay, again, the research questions that you want to write, okay, this happens a lot, and I hope we can together correct this, should not be written with the focus of the phases of instructional design. Okay, for example, okay, sebelum tu, but you should focus on the problems and the solutions. Okay, so for example, it's not advisable for you to say, what are the, it's not good if your research questions are based on the ADDIE. For example, in A, analysis phase, the questions are, and you write, what are the problems in teaching year 1 mathematics? Okay, in design and development phase, you ask the question, what are the processes involved in the design and development of the ABC module, which is a solution for the problems to identify. And third, you ask, what are the perceptions of the learners, or what are the impact of this module that you have developed on the learners? Okay, this is implementation or evaluation level. This is not advisable, and it's not, Harrington said, it's not DDR. okay, not the real DDR. Now, what you can do is to turn it a little bit, okay? How would the theory XYZ be applied in the process of designing and developing the ABC module? Let's say the history teacher tadi has problem to motivate the students to learn history. So you then come up with a solution to develop a product and app that integrate or apply the theory of motivation in it. So your research questions should be, how do the theory of motivation be applied in the process of developing the app for history students? Okay, that is the correct way of writing your RQ research question. Second, how did or in what ways the online module or the online app, the history app assist the students? Let's say if you want to focus on creative development skills, you mention it clearly there. Okay, not just something very wide. For example, how did the module assist the students' knowledge? As it's not, it has to be specific. For example, what knowledge? Okay, history knowledge or multimedia development knowledge, if the students happen to do a multimedia project in that history class lah. Okay, so you have to be very specific. Okay, so this is the chapter 1 part. Okay, now in the methodology section, I have already shared with you. Try to diversify your research approaches. Okay, it is common in our field, not just in our instructional design field, but in education in general. Okay, I know some people in measurement and testing will marah lah, but yang selain daripada itulah. So most of the time we are very comfortable using qualitative approaches, and most of the time we'll use case study. This is case study. This is case study. Penat lah dengar. Because sometimes when they say this is a case study, they don't follow the case study characteristics. Okay, so again, I'm not talking much about that. Diversifying your research approaches, because sometimes it is difficult to define the model. If you are developing a model, difficult to define a model, and it cannot be generalized to other cases. Okay, so it's also consequently difficult to get buy-in from your journal readers. Okay, sometimes you talk about your product development. Okay lah, kita dah ada satu produk yang maha hebat ni. We have tested and looks like everyone got an A. Okay, excellent. Pandai belajar after using our product. But when you try to publish it, you just realize, my product is specific, context specific, meaning that only applicable to that people that you tested and designed it for, because that's the aim of the DDR. Okay, and the readers of the journal are wide. Okay, they are coming from many countries, not just Malaysia, and not just specific sekolah that you are using the product for. So you need to think about how to make your applicable to others. Okay, so one way of doing it is to do triangulation and also diversify your research methods. Okay, so I have been experiencing, I was trained qualitative researcher. I do ethnographic. Okay, ethnographic is not that easy to do, but I've done it. Okay, formally trained as qualitative researcher. Okay, but now I have ventured into quantitative. Okay, I'm doing a lot of structural equation modeling, SEM, and sometimes I do mixed method. Okay, why I'm doing this? Because I I look into the journals and I see that it's not, the future trend of our field should be something that is generalizable to others and beneficial to others. We have to document it. Okay, so now I'm trying to give some values to the qualitative cases that I've studied. All right. But I'm not saying this is the only way to do it. This is just some suggestions. Maybe your experience suggests others. Okay, in terms of data analysis, okay, if you really want to do qualitative approach, okay, make sure you expose your rich data. Okay, one, expose the richness of your data, meaning that if you're doing interview, observation, make sure those are included in your data analysis and also in your writing. Second, which is not easy for all people to do, is the coding process. This is a challenge for those doing qualitative research, not just for DDR, but for education research in general. So usually when students come to Viva or even in UM, we call Seminar 1. Seminar 2 meaning apa Candidature defense, bukan candidature. Alright, so they will say, my research is qualitative, pure qualitative. But once I ask them, where is your coding process? Show me your codes. Because if you are claiming yourself a qualitative researcher, you should be doing coding, right? So you have open coding, you have specific coding, show me the coding. They can't, okay? And in fact, sometimes they say, I do thematic analysis. Okay, if you do thematic analysis, show me the process from how many open coding, let's say 150 codes you have in the open coding stage. Then you have make it into just 50 codes, and then you refine it into 5 thematic analysis. I want to see the coding process. Tell me where it is. And they can't. Okay, by right, my fellow friends who are teaching in education, they know this, and I'm sure they are practicing this. We need to have a book of coding, a code book, we call it. What is a code book? It's like, if I interview someone, let's say I interview named Farah, so my code for that person, for interview that one, could be FA01 dash. Okay, that is book of code. When I ask where is your the code of book of code, they can't. Okay, so please don't degrade our profession. Don't sabotage our field. Okay, show that we care about the data, we really do it, and we do it systematically and do it based on the science. It's because we have been, because as I mentioned, I do research on our profession. Okay, so what make a person instructional design? Everybody can claim I am instructional designer just because they take one course in instructional design, or just because they are assigned to do an instructional design project. So in my research of our profession, I found that people can claim because our field is quite longer. Okay, it's quite what can I say? What can I say? We ourselves, okay, don't really uphold our profession. We don't really do research well, which allow other people from other discipline without proper training in instructional design sabotage our field and claim themselves to be doing instructional design. Okay, so anyway, don't just state that you have coded something, but tell your audience how you do it, with the purpose of that other designers can read and learn and replicate your process. Okay. Second, triangulate your data. Use several methods. And this is very important. Please cite your data in your writing. For example, when you say that I have interviewed, you say that I have 3 methods to collect data: interview, observation, another one is students' reflection. But I don't see all these 3 being written in the thesis or in the paper. Okay, I can see, so usually I will say, for my students, I will say, okay, where are the codes from the interview? What is the code of that person's interview? So to that detail, if you can do that, excellent. You are excellent qualitative researcher. All right. Oh, okay, that's it for now. I'm now open for Q&A or discussion or sharing. Thank you.
Okay, kita buka untuk sesi Q&A. First of all, terima kasih Dr. Farah. Thank you so much. It's a very fruitful session. Untuk Q&A session, saya harap ada yang boleh bertanya tapi boleh gunakan features raise hand dekat dalam Zoom. So nanti kita akan unmute. Oh, Dr. Faizal, kita boleh unmute semua ke macam mana?
Boleh unmute siapa yang nak bercakap kot.
Unmute semua.
Siapa-siapa yang cakap dia boleh unmute diri dia sendiri lah kot.
Okay. Mana yang tidak mahu bertanya secara live boleh juga letak soalan di ruang chat lah. Rasanya dah ada soalan juga di ruang chat tu saya
Saya stop sharing ke sekarang? Okay, tak apa. Saya dengar soalan dulu lah.
Okay. Anyone ada yang nak bertanya?
Or just sharing pun tak apa.
Oh, maybe mungkin for the time being mungkin Dr. Hazrati boleh tolong bacakan kot soalan yang ada dekat chat tu. Saya tengok di situ daripada PM Dr. Syarul. Ada posted few questions there.
Ada dua soalan, okay. Hold on. So, hi Dr. Farah. How and when do you protect the model that you created? So do you just publish and deems to be protected, or do you take any other measures to protect before you publish? So has there been any instances of people copying other people's model and claim it as their own? Kemudian soalan berikutnya ke Dr. Nak jawab soalan tu dulu?
Okay, kalau saya jawab kan saya bebel, saya start soalan dulu lah.
I mean, this is from the same person juga. So the second question from Dr. Sharul Ismail is if we do a model development research under research for design and development to develop our own model, won't that actually be comprehensive DDR under research for tools and product? So can they overlap, and what's the difference?
Okay. Ya, saya salin dulu sebelum tu.
If you need, Dr. Farah boleh tengok dekat chat juga kot, the questions.
Saya stop sharing lah ya.
Okay.
Chat sini. Okay.
Yeah, there's two questions there.
Okay. So the first question is about how do you protect the model that you created. The paper that I show you just now was a paper in 2008 when I was a student. At that time, I didn't know about IPR, okay, the copyright and thing, and the purpose was to share, okay. But when now I learned that we have to protect it. So what I do, if I have a model that I think worth to be protected, I will contact in it's called UMCIC, the Commercialization Center, and register the model. In fact, I've done, I think one or two model I have registered for IPR. I have several, I think, it cannot be a patent. It's easy to be copyright, but one of the model that I did, I think I got a patent for that because it's quite comprehensive. So it is good if you can protect it first, okay? But sometimes we just want to share the model with others, for example, through conferences. So what you can do is that while you presenting the model, just mention that this is in the process of being copyrighted. So please cite this model as this way. Okay, that's one question. I hope that question is answered. Okay, regarding the model development, does it develop with, saya baca balik. Yeah. So if we do DDR model, yes, we will talk about the comprehensive modeling, I mean in type 1. But again, the focus will be on the development model only. So what works and what not for that model. And if there is a conditions, let's say the model will only work if you have an SME with instructional design background. Okay, so that makes it different from the type 1. Okay, if you just talk about the process in the model, that is not model development, that is type 1. So you have to talk about the implications of facilitating conditions for your model to work. That is type 2. Okay, I hope it answered Dr. Sharul's question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Farah. We have another question also from the chat, from the group chat. It's from Si Yun Chong. So can you explain more about the coding book? So if the research involved focus group interview and observation, do the all notes taken from the interview be recorded in the coding book?
Yes. Okay, coding book, I call it a book because it's so thick lah, tebal. It's supposed to be memang tebal pun. So if let's say you have an interview, okay, so you have to transcribe the interview first, okay, and then you want to look at the interview and then make a first type of coding, or we call it open coding first. So you have first open coding. So in your first open coding, you put it in the open code book and you can label it like open coding 1, this code book. And this process will happen to all the interviews you do. Okay, if you have interviewed one person 3 times, so you have to have these codes for that one person in one section of the book. And then the second person you interview will be the second codes. And continue. If you have observation, then observation 1, observation 2, okay, that is what coding book means. Book meaning a compilation of all the codes that you have. Okay, sometimes people in DDR do, iterative cycle can be 2 or 3 times, and sometimes to refer to what cycle they make a special coding. For example, C1 refers to cycle 1, FG focus group 1, okay, and focus group 1 too, meaning this group of people. So only the researcher knows what the codes mean. So that's why when you do the research, people ask you, what is the coding means, from what session, what is the background of the participants that you do. So you have to have it in your mind. But if you forget, sometimes people, bila tanya kena sergah dalam Bible dia terlupa. So it will be good to have something documented. So you can open your coding book and say, oh, this is from this session, and so on. Okay? Miss Haida Umira Hashim. Puan Hazrati boleh tolong baca tak?
Boleh. Okay, so Ms. Haida bertanya, so you mentioned that it is very crucial to ensure that we show our coding process for thematic analysis. So I'm aware that we have NVivo as a tool for us to do our coding for qualitative data, but you also mentioned that we can also have the book of code. I think hence meaning that the way we process or do our coding can be flexible. So as long as you have proof of the process, or do you have any specific suggestions on the process of coding that you would recommend? Lebih kurang sama soalan tadi kot.
Lebih kurang sama.
Yeah.
So NVivo is just a software to help you coding. When in my student years, I do it manually. Okay, mula-mula I do it on paper. Lepas tu dah penat tulis, I pun masukkan dalam Excel. That's how I do my coding. And then I learn about NVivo. So it doesn't matter what are the platforms or what are the tools that you use, as long as the coding processes is correct, it is fine. Okay. Kalau jawapan saya tak puas hati, boleh tanya lagi tau.
Okay. So next question is from Ikram. So, Assalamualaikum Dr. Farah dan para pensyarah. So untuk validate model yang telah kita bangunkan, adakah kita perlu gunakan pelbagai metod untuk validate? Contohnya, jalankan eksperimen dan expert validation atau choose yang mana paling sesuai?
Mm, okay, there are many ways of doing model validation. Okay, people do you can do it various ways. For the purpose of doctoral or master's research, I personally encourage one sajalah, because you master that one process that and then you put in detail. Are you aware of the, you know, what's the apa ya, Dr. Farisa boleh tolong saya ni, where we ask the experts beberapa kali tu.
Oh, Fuzzy Delphi.
Delphi. Okay, some people use Delphi to validate their instrument. That also can be done. Okay, some people dia tak guna Delphi, tapi dia just bertanya qualitatively. So Delphi should have some instrument. Tapi for if you do it qualitatively, meaning that you ask people with the same questions, interview protocol, so that can be done also. Or you can use statistics lah. For example, you can use SEM, okay, to do the modeling. Okay, whatever method you use, just make sure that you master the process and you put all details in your writing.
Okay. Alright. Saya pun ada soalan tapi tak apalah, saya baca dulu soalan lain daripada grup ni. Oh, kita ada satu soalan daripada rakan pensyarah di F1, Dr. Aida. Hi Dr. Farah, is it sufficient for a PhD students to use DDR and ADDIE framework together in their work, or they need to have a specific models in their studies?
Okay, as I mentioned, okay, DDR is a nama of the methodology. In the DDR, you can use a lot of methods. Contoh methods that you can use ialah apa tadi? Apa tu soalan dia? Saya nak guna balik dia punya tu.
Bawah sekali.
Qualitative or mixed methods. You can do anything. What was the question again?
Bawah sekali. Is it sufficient to use DDR and ADDIE framework together in their work? Adakah ataupun perlu ada specific ID model yang lain?
Okay. So, jawapan yang ringkas ialah it's not sufficient for me to use ADDIE framework alone. Okay, because the ADDIE is framework, it's not a model. Okay, it will be good if you mention I'm doing this research based on ADDIE framework, but I am using Monica Tracy's ID model to help me in the design and development processes. That is something that we need, because everything needs to have a theory. Okay, and the model that you cite is actually based on or constructed based on a specific theory. So once you use that model, you cite that model, you then have to, in your theoretical framework section of the chapter 2, you will have then to talk about the theory and how you incorporate that theory in that model. Sebab in ADDIE framework, it's just a framework. It's just, there is no steps in it. But in a model, there is very specific what you have to do. Let's say in analysis phase, you might have to do 3 types of analysis in this model. Whereas in other model, you have to just do 1. So if you're a PhD student doing this, it will be good if you have a specific model that you want to cite in your research.
Okay, boleh ke saya tanya soalan juga? Okay, saya ada soalan. It's actually about model use, type 2 dalam DDR, model use. So if let's say kita menggunakan certain specific model, and then in that kind of research, correct me if I'm wrong, pahaman saya is at the end of the research, kita akan produce added value kepada model yang kita gunakan dalam kajian. Is that true? Dalam kategori model use.
Okay, model use agak jarang wait. Kita akan gunakan model use as a basis for the other two. Kejap saya buka slide kejap. Okay, ni. Okay, we're talking about this one kan? Puan Hazrati kan?
Yeah, yeah.
The model used ni, actually we have to use a model in the first place. For the type 2 DDR research, we have to use a model first. Let's say you are using Faradina model. Okay, so then you mention what are the conditions that impact the use of the model. That is, kalau you stop just there, that is model use. But if you go on to say that, I suggest that in this specific type of Faradina module, stage number 3, these are the further steps that need to be done. It can then be considered a model development, but not model development.
So kita boleh claim terus sebagai model ataupun sebagai framework dahulu.
You can claim it as a model if you have validated it, meaning that you have the model and you test it with real people, okay, real target audiences, and then based on the results, you then say, oh, this is the recommendations specific in this stage of that model. And then it can be considered as model development. Actually, I don't see these three as separate. These are complementing each other. Okay, we usually start with model, establish model first, and then we do some iteration, and then we more validate it. So these are sometimes there's no lines yang clear between those, but usually we will end up with model development. Tapi provided we have done the model validation first lah. If we just tak ada participant, you tak collect data, you tak do data analysis, you can't claim it as model development.
But is it okay if we just stop at sampai framework saja and then we mention in discussion chapter ataupun in chapter 6 ke, mengatakan that for future research yang model framework ini kita boleh propose untuk ditest in another context ke? Is that okay?
If you don't develop a model or develop a product that is not DDR, perhaps you're doing just feature review type of research, okay, that is not DDR. DDR must have a real project, real people, real test and validation. That is DDR.
Okay. Alright. Kita ada lagi soalan di bahagian ruangan chat. Boleh Assalamualaikum Dr. Farah. So boleh kita claim DDR is multi-method approach?
Multi-method in what terms and what types? To claim something, you have to be very careful. Memang kita boleh kata we use several methods for DDR research, but we cannot claim that DDR is multiple methods. But DDR can be done using various methods. I think masih boleh diterima lah. You can't, because it's not the same. Okay, if I were you, I will not take that dilemma or burden to explain further. But what we know is that DDR can, various methods can be done in a DDR research. Okay, but to say that DDR is multiple method, I think is not really correct lah, unless I tak berapa faham dia soalan.
Okay, harap menjawab. And then Dr. Faiza, kita ada Dr. Aida Karim soalan, saya baru perasan. Is it, so in any master or PhD works, they either choose type 1 or type 2, or is it feasible to combine type 1 and 2 in the work?
Wow. Usually you will focus on either type 1 or type 2. Okay, to combine will take time, years, okay, actually, to do just one, for example, model development, actually beberapa tahun juga to see, you have to test whether the model pada orang for another setting can be accepted. You know, you test with group 1 and then you test another setting, group 2 and then group 3. It self ambil masa. What lagi lah kita nak combine. But I also wanted to share my concern. Now, I've seen that some students think of DDR is just like, as long as I design and develop a product, that is DDR. Okay, again, I wanted to highlight here that even though you are developing products or tools or even models if you want, you have to make sure all the characteristics that we have discussed earlier are there. Okay, all the recommendations for other instructional designers, all the model development steps, the validation, dan sebagainya, it needs to be there. If I were you, I will only focus on specific type in that type 1, for example, instead of just buat semua, ambil type 1 and then combine dengan type 2. Agak susah lah nak buat if you really follow the steps. So I will suggest to focus on just one category or subcategory, okay, that is feasible for doctoral students.
So if I can,
Dr. Farah, do you mind if I just interrupt a little bit?
Boleh? Siapa dia?
Okay, macam tu sebenarnya tadi tu I'm quite confused. I thought some of the students are doing a quasi experiment, right? So at the end of the day, the study will not only contribute to the ID or the model application, but also will see whether whatever they've been developing and implemented is effective or efficient in solving the problem that they've been identified earlier. So does that quasi experiment type of evaluation fit into DDR type 1?
Okay, let's go back to type 1, yeah.
Because I see a slide say that it's not research about the impact of the medium, something like that. I'm afraid I misunderstood that, so I hope I can get some clarification from you.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. If you're talking about this one,
the characteristic for type 1 and type 2, I think on the earlier slide. Ya ke, ada ke? The no for DDR type 1. So the DDR type 1 is not for something. So one of the things that I just caught is about it's not about the effectiveness or something like that. So I just wondering, because some of the students interested to do the quasi experiment and they still claim that their study is still under type 1. So it is okay for them to claim that they are doing type 1. Where is that? The characteristic, this is the type 1 and no, this is not the characteristic of type 1. Mana tadi? Ada awal-awal tadi tu. Saya pun not, yes. Impact, the comparison, because if the student would like to do the quasi experiment, they would like to compare it with some conventional way of teaching, right? So does that really goes under this not a study about?
Okay, if they are comparing between product,
between their learning material that they've been developed and also the conventional way of learning. So they just it is okay. We still claim it under type 1 DDR.
Okay, so let's say the students, I think the intention of the students is to, let's say they develop a new approach of teaching history, for example. So she probably use a specific theory or a model, and then talk about the implementation and evaluation of the effectiveness of the approach.
Yes.
So that could be considered as DDR.
Okay.
But when they are using or comparing this with another conventional method.
Okay.
If you're comparing things, I imagine you have to do experimentation kan?
Yes.
Experimental. So experimental study is usually not DDR.
Okay.
DDR must involve development of the method. So when you do evaluate the effectiveness of your teaching, you focus on your teaching approach only. You don't usually compare with other method unless you also study that method. So those method, dua method yang you study tu, and then out of those method, you come up with a new model or new theory. That is
okay. If that's so, it is okay if the researcher do not compare with the different method, but just compare from the pre and the post test. Is it possible? Just to show, yes, the problem had been solved, the student achievement had been, increased by implementing the developed learning material.
Okay, that is, I imagine that will involve a specific product or tools that is used. Okay, so they wanted to show that, okay, this specific tool has improved the learning. That will fall under this, under research products tu, tool and development. Okay.
So it's still, okay, thank you. So it is possible, yeah?
It is possible.
Because I just keep reading that, there is no impact study. So how? I mean, because we want to claim it as DDR. I mean, some of them want to claim it under the flagship or the umbrella of DDR, because you just mentioned DDR is the umbrella, the methodology, right? And under that, yes, they will use other method to answer their research question, and one of the research question could be does whatever they developed or implemented solve the problem, yeah?
Correct.
So okay, thank you, Dr. Farah.
Dr. Fariza?
Mungkin saya nak slot in satu soalan. Ni pun mungkin sebenarnya dikirim oleh beberapa rakan dan juga pelajar lah, dan juga had been on the discussion for quite a while juga. And then of course thanks Dr. Farah for the very insightful sharing today. I learned a lot as well. Okay, so apa yang mungkin saya boleh recap sedikit lah tentang DDR ni. Dia memang satu payung yang besar, dan when it comes to the methodologies, mungkin it involves more than one methodologies kan. Maknanya in terms of data collection and all that, mungkin certain tu kita boleh buat survey dan sebagainya lah. So maksud dia melibatkan mungkin instrumentations yang berbeza. Cuma mungkin saya nak ajukan soalan ni pada Dr. Farah. In terms of epistemology, what would be the best epistemology kalau kita boleh claim lah when it comes to DDR? Sebab all this why mungkin many of us are quite aware of we have interpretivists, on the other hand we have positivists kan, untuk quali dan quantitative. Jadi untuk DDR ni mungkin macam penyelidik berfikir how they do position themselves. Dia sebagai interpretivist ke ataupun positivist, ataupun mungkin ada pragmatism dan sebagainya lah. Mungkin Dr. Farah boleh share dengan kita kot ni tentang hal ni. Thank you.
Okay, yang ni sama-sama lah kawan-kawan researcher semua. Kalau saya silap, these ontological views ataupun how you position yourself is actually depends on the study lah itself. I hampir-hampir nak cakap tadi, it could be mostly interpretive, okay, interpretism. Sebab we do and we reflect a lot, okay, and because we reflected on it, we produce something new. It could be in the form of product or design practices and model and so on. But we also have to remember that there is dalam model development ni, okay, we have model development and also model validation. In model validation, usually we will use a lot of times we will use statistics lah involved, and so it's not fair to say that kalau DDR aja must be interpretivism. It could also be positivism. Okay, depending on how you bring the direction of your research. I've seen a lot of model validation lately, maybe because I'm also interested in it now. Yang menggunakan quantitative, they will do modeling like SEM, correlation research. Tapi correlation tu belum lagi lah model validation. That kind of statistics thing. So for those who are doing that statistic part, they may position themselves as positivism lah instead of interpretivism. That's my sides lah.
Okay, thank you.
That one.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, kita
Maybe we
ada
have some more questions on chat box.
Ya, ada soalan daripada chat box. Assalamualaikum Dr. Farah. Saya membina apps dan dah ada expert review dalam 14 orang. So ada 14 orang expert review. So adakah ianya mencukupi untuk validate apps saya itu boleh digunakan untuk intervensi? Dan soalan yang berikutnya, dalam fasa penilaian saya menerapkan quasi eksperimen untuk menilai keberkesanan intervensi menggunakan apps tersebut, dan soal selidik untuk fasa kebolehgunaan apps. Adakah ianya sesuai?
In practical, just based on the description given, it looks like it is fine. Okay. Tapi saya tak pasti kalau saya boleh tahu dia punya topik ke apa, memang mungkin berbeza lah, tapi it is okay for, the first question is about expert. You're using, I'm not sure, maybe I imagine lah, because the yang bertanya tu tak beritahu secara spesifik. I imagine that you develop an app for a target audience, and then you get expert reviews on the effectiveness of the app. If that is the situation, biasanya app ni kita tanya keberkesanannya kepada pengguna, okay, the students yang akan menggunakannya. Okay, kalau teachers yang akan menggunakan app, so you should ask, the experts will be the teachers. If you the students are the users, so you should ask the users. So anyway, regardless of mana satu, who you consider as expert, the numbers is tak kisah. If you're doing it qualitatively, if you have limited number, but kalau boleh bukanlah 1, 2, 3, if you have like the more the better lah. So if you have like 5 and lebih, that will be good expert validation lah. So when you are doing this validation also, I also banyak juga students saya pada universiti luar, students DM juga minta saya jadi expert review, but they don't give me an instrument or a tool to review. Okay, as an expert, I need to know, first I need to be guided. What should I be reviewing about? Nak tengok usability ke, nak tengok dia punya effectiveness ke, ataupun nak tengok the navigation link ke. There is no clear instruction. So what I'm suggesting, if you're doing this kind of research, you have to create, we call it protocol, a protocol of reviewing. Okay, what kind of things you want the expert to look into. Second, give them instrument. A simple table pun is okay. For example, a table, you have column, sebelah column yang pertama, you talk about the aspect that they have to look. For example, number 1, you want them to look into the interaction between the features or the component in it is acceptable. So then the column yang seterusnya, you can say either strongly agree, strongly disagree, and then you have open-ended box itu where they can give their opinion why they say it so. Okay, so if we have that instrument, your expert reviews will be good. Okay, meaning that it is something yang we can consider as empirical lah. Kalau it's just like, I have jumpa juga ada students yang macam, doktor tolong please review this, and I'm like, okay, what aspect? Nak tulis kat mana ni? So like even the product also that they develop, they don't show it to me. So I don't know how. What should I interview? So sometimes they say they give me interview questions that they want to interview the teachers yang akan menggunakan apps lah, and ask me to do, okay, these are the questions. Please review. Please review. What do you want me to look into? Okay, so in statistics, and I've been learning this baru-baru juga lah since I have been doing SEM ni. So there is a method. Orang kata apa? Kenapalah semua tak keluar hari ni. So actually it's about you need to have it's like a survey like the point where you akan later you kira expert satu punya point strongly disagree plus yang another expert, and then it will come up with I'm so sorry, I'm kadang-kadang terlupa apa benda terms tertentu, but please go to my ni lah, usually my papers ada banyak dekat dekat ni website ni ya, EM Expert, and also academia atau research gate lah. Usually I will share the paper yang mana yang boleh open-ended. So there are several papers that I've done also lah yang computing this expert reviews ni. I jawab question ke tadi? It's about expert reviews kan, you tanya number of reviewers kan. So 14 is okay, considered good. But if you are doing it quantitatively, you may want to get lebih sikit sebab sometimes the expert review tu, for example, if you give them an instrument, not all answer all questions. So yang tu you kena reject. So if you can get more, like 20 ke 15 ke will be good. Kalau semua 14 jawab dengan lengkap, I think that's rich enough lah. Boleh digunakan. Apa yang question kedua? Sama ke?
Okay, mungkin kita boleh ambil satu lagi soalan. Sebenarnya ada dua tu. Okay, kalau kita boleh extend tadi tentang model validation yang type 2, saya assume adakah internal validation or external validation lebih sesuai untuk model validation?
Apa maksud internal dan external validation tu?
Soalan daripada chat box saudara Nizam.
Adakah you mean the expert yang validate tu?
Rasanya saya assume saudara Nizam kalau ada boleh clarify soalan ni, kalau berada masih ada di sini.
Unmute, boleh bersuara.
Ada ke?
Ada kan Cik Nizam?
Ya, betul. Salam betul.
Okay.
Okay. Saya refer internal validation tu adalah untuk usability of model. Okay. And external validation tu macam kita gunakan quasi eksperimen untuk di stage validate. So sekarang ni untuk stage validation, adakah kita gunakan usability ataupun effectiveness, yang mana yang lebih sesuai? Usability itu lebih prefer kepada internal validation, and then quasi itu lebih kita prefer kepada external validation. So yang mana satu pada pandangan doktor yang sesuai kita gunakan di stage 3? Okay?
Okay. Maaflah kalau saya maybe tak, I kind of disagree to melabelkan certain study like usability study is internal, quasi is external, because to me those are methods which can fall in any, tak perlu labeling lah in that. So but if I understood correctly, that means that internal usability study tu ialah study that you did with the participants kan, yang akan menggunakan that product kan, betul ke? See? So usability study with the participants, and another one is quasi experiment with the same participant juga yang akan menggunakannya. So for me, regardless of the label, both are okay. Usually bila kita buat product development and you want to test the effectiveness of the model, you will do both. It depends on the question. Yang usually, kalau in my study, kalau my students, I will ask to ask both. first they will ask about the features of the product, whether the features are good, boleh digunakan, mudah difahami dan sebagainya. And then I will ask them to ask another question juga yang berkaitan dengan the theory. For example, this it depends on the theory that you petik lah. Let's say the theory that you petik in the beginning is about motivation theory tadi tu. So the question will be like, this app membantu meningkatkan motivasi saya untuk belajar matematik lagi. Ataupun this app, you know, if you look at the theory kan ada dia punya variables kan. So you ask questions about the variables in the second part of that evaluation or that instrument. So is that acceptable then, Cik Nizam? Am I answering your question? So to me, there is no label of internal or external. Both are considered as methods and can be done. Whichever yang good, I think both needs to be asked, needs to be tested. In practicality, selalunya dalam satu survey atau instrument validation tu, saya akan pastikan student saya jawab. First part is the usability testing or usability part of that product. Satu lagi is related to the theory that they use. Yeah.
Okay. Alright. Dr. Faizal, kita nak ambil soalan lagi ke? Saya pun duk tengok macam dah tak ada dah soalan.
Kalau Dr. Fariza nak komen pun, kawan-kawan lecturers yang lain pun silalah, saya pun belajar je sama-sama.
Dr. Faizal unmute, tak dengar.
Lupa pula terbisu tadi. Okay. So saya rasa ini adalah mungkin apa yang memang kita tunggu selama ni. We have been waiting for Dr. Farah to share with us because I know that she's expert in DDR and DBR as well. So I think one of the main takeaways to all of us sebenarnya ialah kalau mungkin Dr. Farah boleh share balik ataupun on apa nama ni last two slides tu yang further consideration specifically on the kinds of research questions that we have or we should not have in our DDR research. Sebab saya perhatikan juga there are many researchers, perhaps our students lah, when they did DDR research, and when we see and we look at the research questions, all the research questions were developed based on the phases that we have or they have in DDR. Macam tadi lah, what are the problems, and then how do the design made, how do we develop and all that. So I think that will be one of the main takeaways, at least for me, that we should not continue doing this lah. Mungkin satu pencerahan untuk kita semua. Mungkin maybe in future we have many more students coming to us telling us that they want to do DDR research. So I think we also need to give a consideration or give full attention to this aspect kan, sebab sometimes bila research question tu hanyalah dibuat based on the phases that they have in DDR, maknanya they forget about the theories that they use in the research. They don't even evaluate, sebab teori tu sangat signifikan kan, why we want to use this theory, but at the end dia tidak boleh ada reflection sebab dia tidak mengukur ataupun dia tidak go back to the theory that has been integrated into their DDR process. Therefore dia hanya hanging setakat produk sahaja. So DDR is not just about product kan, tetapi sebenarnya research about the research process itself. So saya rasa itu antara main thing that we all of us, kalau kita cakap tentang DDR lah. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Farah, but that is my main takeaway, at least from many others lah. Tapi saya rasa ini yang saya sama-sama saya nak supaya kita semua dapat orang kata celik lah tentang what should and what should not be research questions in DDR research. Thank you.
Dr. Fariza, memang ini pun satu perkara yang besar jugalah, sebab the research questions akan menentukan research method kan. Kita kan kena constructive alignment. So what's important is it's not about the process sangat, tapi what we learn, the lessons learned from the process. That's why the way we ask questions pun kena betul. And this is satu yang Jen Harrington, yang ni the question ni recommendation also from her juga. So what she said is that try not to use question yang bersifat tertutup ke. Contohnya what are the process, what are the problems, ataupun yang bersifat yes or no. Okay, at our level, masters and PhD especially, kita nak something yang open-ended, macam contohnya how, in what ways, so that kita boleh banyak lagi kita boleh eksperimen. Eksperimen dari segi method yang pelbagai, dari segi data analysis and so on lah. So at PhD level especially, try not to use what, okay, try to use how. Okay.
Dr. Farah, boleh kacau?
Tak kacau. Boleh, silakan.
Saya pun confused. Cuma sekarang ni bila saya nampak soalan Dr. Farah tu, memang fokus dia bukan fasa, tapi the way you ask the research question, right? For example, fasa, bila kata masih ada soalan tentang fasa designing, contohnya yes question tu, you were asking about, the researcher could ask about what and how the theory had been applied, right? Still under phase of design punya fasa kan, phase fasa design phase. However, I noticed that we still can use the phases, but the way you write the question in such a way that is more open, is more, I think, serve the purpose, right? Because for example, for the purpose, this research purpose is to develop and to implement or something like that. So I just wondering, do we have any question about the analysis? What instead of what are the problem? Because need analysis is one of the main phase in designing or developing some sort of tool or product. So how don't we need any question about the need analysis at all? Or do we have any a good way to state it in our research question?
Thank you, Doctor, for sharing this. Perhaps saya pun tak terlepas pandang. We do have research on, ingatkan tadi ada ADDIE, you can select A saja, the analysis part. So research apa bentuk need assessment. So for research need assessment, kita memang tak boleh lari lah daripada menggunakan what tu. Okay, contoh ask what are the current situations di Malaysia contohnya. So the what question tu memang perlu kita tanya. Okay, what are the current issues related to online teaching nowadays? Okay, so that
still we can state that analysis question, because I just wondering if there is no research question, there will be no finding, right? So the examiner or the audience will not be able to understand what the problem happening that lead to the development and the implementation of the tools or learning material.
Tapi kan Doktor,
itulah. Macam mana tu?
That is the question that I share tadi tu is specific for the assessment part. The analysis phase. Which is what are the current problems in this? Because the next question will be, what are the needs of the lecturers? What are the training needs of the lecturers in online teaching, for example? So that is specific for the analysis part. But these questions is not good or not suitable to be asked for DDR yang lain tu. Contohnya in design and development of product. Why? Because this question you tak payah tanya pun, memang dah ada dalam chapter 2, which is in your literature review, right? Especially problem statement chapter 1. So if we are doing, saya pergi balik ke ni. If we are doing the first type tu.
Type 1.
Type 1, okay. Okay. Kalau questions, if we are doing design and development studies, you don't have to ask that question anymore, okay? Because those questions are not the focus of this type of phase. In this focus is the process, okay, or the model development. So it should not be asked or not a research question because it's not the focus. Plus, already answer it in the problem statement. Bukankah sebelum kita develop produk, kita dah tanya, dah selidik dulu what are the issues kan? So that is not D lah dalam DD.
Oh, so basically the need analysis, for example, in your case is about the teachers' online learning. So what the problem faced by the teachers is written on problem statement.
For design and development type of study, if we specific on that, we don't ask the question yang need analysis too.
Oh, we don't ask. How about, for example, PhD student are doing instructional design that have all these phases, the ADDIE. So we don't still need to have that kind of question?
No, you don't have to, because you will eventually talk about that in the problem statement and then literature review as well. So the focus of DDR will be on the process. Tadi yang kita cakap ni.
On the process.
Systematic study of the processes. Ini yang akan melahirkan products, tools and models. So we focus more on the process. So the questions that should be asked in a DDR research should be on the process lah, related.
On the process. Okay. Okay. Alright. Thank you.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
Alright. Dah boleh ke Dr. Farah, saya ada satu soalan terakhir sebab tadi Dr. Farah ada mention that you one of the reviewer untuk jurnal yang berkaitan dengan IDT ni. Jadi mungkin kalau Dr. Farah boleh share jurnal-jurnal yang yang mungkin pelajar-pelajar kita bolehlah mencuba nasib from your experience lah.
Okay, ini kena buat session lain. Sebab dia ada banyak kategori of journals. Kalau you're looking into ISI journal, sebenarnya agak susah lah, tak ada journal yang khas, ISI journal yang khas untuk design and development. But if you tweak your publication or paper a little bit, you can publish in, for example, British Journal of Educational Technology, that is Q1 SI, or AJET, Australasian Journal of Educational Technology. But kena tweak sikit lah sebab the readers are not designers. Dia punya readers are more fascinated or more interested with the product development and the impact of the product, and they're also interested in the theory of learning yang you guna for the product development. So you can kena tweak sikit paper. If you focus only on the testing of the product, you may want to go to computer CNE computer and education. That is tier 1. I cakap pasal Q1 je. Yang Q4 semua tu biasanya I tak berapa perasan lah, tapi Q1 memang CNE itulah. Okay, if you talk about the participants or the culture, let's say this is an app and the culture in Malaysia memang sangat-sangat memerlukan or sangat conducive for this app. You may want to go for region based or region related journal, for example Asia Pacific journal. But they are not interested in your product tau, they're interested in the culture. So that's why I said this one needs to be mula kita kena baca dulu that journal. Jadi pembaca setia jurnal tersebut yang you nak publish, so that you can understand apa yang aspirasi the editorial board tu. Okay? And second, selalu saya pesan kat student UM, PhD and Masters, they must publish ISI, 1 ISI or 2 scopus or 4 chapters in book, 4 ke 6 ataupun equivalent to 2 or 3 2 books by international or university publishers. And that requirement is actually bukan senang lah, I can say, for our UM students. But alhamdulillah, they are the peak dah mula lah. So the lecturers, membebel pula tapi tak sikit je. The lecturers now ni has not just guiding the students on the research, but also on the publications. So selalu saya pesan dengan students, if you want to do a topic, you start first with the journal that you want to publish, which is taklah bagus kan nak advice macam tu. But inilah nak hidup, nak kesian kat dia orang bagi graduate. So regularly you have to cite. So in your research, keep on citing the journal that you want to publish in. Let's say you nak publish in BJEC, make sure banyak artikel BJEC tu you cite dalam your thesis. So you ada peluang yang cerah sikit lah. Bila dah habis, kalau student UM, they cannot graduate, they have to publish the paper before graduation. Kena tunjuk bukti publication tu dah buat. So what they do will be, sementara nak tunggu proses yang macam-macam lah, teknikal pentadbiran tu, dia dah mula publish dah paper dia tu, dah mula menulis dan publish di journal tu, dan kita akan sentiasa baca lah. So that's one good thing lah about that process.
Okay. Sekarang dah pukul, kita dah terlebih 15 minit daripada perancangan asal. Dr. Farizah masih ada ke?
Ada.
Okay. So okay, so kita stop lah ya. Sampai kita stop sana. Okay, alright. Jadi terima kasih lagi sekali Dr. Farah. Thank you so much for the sharing, and then thank you juga, terima kasih juga kepada yang bertanyakan soalan. So it has been I believe it has been a very great discussion. Dan sebenarnya masih banyak lagi untuk kita bincangkan sebab ada yang request second siri pula dengan Dr. Farah ni. InsyaAllah boleh ke Dr. Farah?
InsyaAllah kita cuba. Kita tangkap Dr. Farah.
Okay. So we have come to the end of the workshop. Jadi saya dah bagi pihak komiti AJK ingin ucapkan 1000 penghargaan. Terima kasih kepada Dr. Farah Dina. It is a pleasure to have you here as a guest speaker. So maybe any some last tips ataupun few words before we wrap up, Dr. Farah. Maybe kata-kata semangat ke kan untuk kepada kita ramai pelajar dekat dalam sesi ni hari ni.
Okay. So I'm so happy that I am able to share some of my insights and also experience tentang DDR ni. And I'm also happy because so many students are now looking into DDR, nak buat DDR. Okay, but again, my appeal to everyone, please do it correctly. Please do it betul systematically, science-based, okay? Because as I mentioned dalam my research about this profession, ramai orang kata I am instructional designer, okay? Because why? Because I'm doing this research. But when you look at the research, tak macam instructional design pun they claim they're instructional designer. So it's because of the research that we produce tu not good enough or not tak berapa rigorous menyebabkan orang lain also can claim that I am doing this and I am instructional designers. So please students, rakan-rakan semua, if you are supervising the students, and even I'm also ingatkan diri sendiri, when we do research, whatever research juga, make sure the methodology is correct and we are doing it with the thinking of benefiting others. Okay, and if you are developing a product, okay, ni dia masuk aspek civic minded lah. If you are developing a product, think about the sustainability of the product, the benefits that people can use the product that you develop, not just for the purpose of master or PhD thesis. Contohnya macam student saya, memang setiap semester saya akan mengajar instructional design course. Dekat rak tu ada banyak lah game lah, app lah, dah macam-macam lagi yang orang kata tersayang lah sebab tak disampai kepada masyarakat. So if we can make this research and then you can publish, you ada copyright, you can commercialize the product. So far saya commercialize tu belum lagi berjaya, tapi saya insyaAllah with the patents I should go forward with that lah. So we are benefiting people with our research and also our product, because that is the uniqueness of our research. Kita ada produk yang kita boleh share dengan orang, kita juga ada research to share with people. Semangat tak?
Setuju.
Setuju. Okay, so
mungkin kita boleh sebelum kita betul-betul berakhir group foto kot. Kan kalau boleh minta semua orang on kan dia punya kamera video. Semua barulah muncul di sebalik tempurung masing-masing. Okay, thank you so much.
Ramainya
baru nampak. Tadi kita ada sampai 89. Tapi dah tinggal 67, mungkin ramai yang dah ada komitmen lain. Okay, so whatever, sebab you don't know in which page you are in my computer, so just smile at the camera. Okay, saya akan snapshot satu persatu. Okay, 1, 2, 3 senyum semua. Lagi sekali. Okay, Puan Zana, Puan Hafizah Suzana nampak tadi dah hilang pula. Okay, lagi sekali senyum. 1, 2, 3. Okay, baru page 1, saya akan beralih ke page 2. Okay, senyum je sebab saya tak tahu, you all tak tahu duduk page mana kan. Okay, senyum saja. 1, 2, 3. Lagi sekali. Okay, Dr. Linda ada tu. Okay, dan page yang ketiga. Okay, page yang ketiga, Dr. Wati tak nak on ke? Dr. Khalid? Okay, 1, 2, 3 ni banyak, semua tak on ni. Yang page 3 ni semua tak on kan kamera. Anyway, okay, Alhamdulillah dah dapat semua. Thank you so much. Okay, and thank you for joining us today. And then of course, thanks again Dr. Farah, and over to you, Dr. Hassan, the official untuk kita mengakhiri.
Okay, jadi again saya harap sesi ini sebenarnya dapat membantu, especially for those who are doing DDR, not just for the students, for the lecturers as well. So hopefully this workshop has enlightened you for some aspect in your study, and then keep you motivated lah untuk teruskan menghabiskan research yang sedang dijalankan. So terima kasih lagi sekali Dr. Farah. So till we meet again insyaAllah. Jadi stay home, stay safe. Kita jumpa lagi insyaAllah. Ini sesi yang kedua ya. Boleh Dr. Farah? InsyaAllah.
InsyaAllah.
Okay. Assalamualaikum and have a good day.
Bye semua. Thank you semua.
Wajib bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you Dr. Farah.
Thank you Dr. Farah.